So I want to talk about the nuts and bolts of budgeting. How would we actually allocate the government budget across all the policies that people might want to promote? And this way that I'm going to describe is the direction in which the UK government is currently moving. So I must start again with the critical necessity for a single measure of well-being. I talked yesterday about the importance of it for campaigning, something people can simply understand. But I want to talk today about the essential nature of it for coherent policy making. And the measure that I think is the one that we can best use is the measure of life satisfaction. There it is. You probably all know it. We know an awful lot about what causes it. It's similar to the measure that we use in the World Happiness Report, where, as you know, the Nordic countries all come out on top. But the base argument for it is, of course, that this is a measure of how people feel their lives are going. And we need a single measure like that. Now, some people say it's only subjective. And this is the main issue that we have to argue with against our opponents. Only subjective. I mean, what matters in life? Isn't what matters in life ultimately the subjective, how we experience it? This is the most profound thing in life. This is what people really care about. So we've got to make fun of the only subjective argument. And of course, the next thing they will say is, well, okay, you may say the subjective is what matters, but how can you know what somebody else is feeling? Are the answers that people give to these questions at all valid? Do they have any information, content in them? Well, as I said yesterday very briefly, they are very well related to very strong objective things which might be affected by well-being. So if you take people aged 50 and above, this was done in England, and you try to predict how many of them will be alive 9 years later, you give them a medical examination and you ask them just a simple question about their subjective well-being. The subjective question is as good a predictor of whether the people will be alive 9 years later as the whole medical diagnosis. So it's important there. It affects quitting, as I said, productivity, and it also affects voting for the existing government. It predicts whether the government will get re-elected better than the economy does. And I think that's a very important argument that we have to use with policymakers. If they want to get re-elected, concentrate on the overall well-being of the population, not just the GDP. Now, this is stepping into new territory for most policymakers. But it's territory that the medics have inhabited for 25 years. So they have been talking about quality-adjusted life years as being the objective of the medical system for 25 years. In Britain, this is enshrined in what we call NICE, the organisation that analyses the impact of each treatment upon the quality-adjusted life years of the population and compares the impact with the cost and authorises only those treatments that produce enough quality-adjusted life years relative to their cost. And what we're advocating for governments as a whole is simply an extension of that way of proceeding to the whole of government policy. So it's not so revolutionary as you might think. And I think we need to stress that. In Britain, at least, there's been no pushback against the QALY concept. It's been perfectly accepted. So I can't see why there should be pushback against the government which says that it's trying to maximise the well-being of the people. Now, as Catherine quite properly said, there's one qualification to that, which of course is non-zero. So we have to take these things in order, and this is the way I would propose looking at it. The first thing a government has to do is to achieve its non-zero target and its trajectory. And it has to do that, of course, at the least cost to well-being method that it can devise. So that's done first. But after that, the rest of the budget is concerned with maximising the well-being years of the population of the country in question. That's the point about medics. So this is what we're talking about now. The government should be thinking about aiming to maximise the sum of well-being years. That's like qualities. It's how long, how people experience their lives, and then, of course, if it affects the number of years, adding that on. So that is the thing you're trying to maximise, subject, of course, to a budget limit, which we must think of as being politically determined. I don't think we're going to get the budget limit determined by our well-being arguments, but let's take that as given. You maximise well-being subject to that limit. That means that you have to take the policies that give the most well-being per dollar of net cost to the budget. So that's the fundamental idea. For every policy proposal that comes into the Treasury, you get the analysts to calculate the well-being impact per dollar. And then you take the proposals in order of their benefit-cost ratio, start with the ones that are highest, and then go down and down until the money's run out. You take the ones which got the highest ratio of benefit to cost. So the central concept that I'm wanting to talk about today is that we've got to have a way of estimating the benefit-cost ratio for every policy proposal, and that's what the Minister of Finance should be looking at, insisting that that's how people try to justify their policies. Now this, for most government analysts, this is not a total change, because they've been used to, I hope, in most countries, being expected to do a benefit-cost ratio. But the way they do that is either looking at the impact of how they measure benefits, looking at the impact on income, or where it's non-income, if they've got some evidence from how people choose, like saving time, the value of time, they add on that to get an estimate of willingness to pay. That's where you can find a monetary measure of the impact of a policy. That is a very sensible thing to be trying to do. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is it leaves out all the other things. It leaves out the psychological impact of being unemployed, of being sick, being robbed, all those other things. And so where the well-being measurement is really going to come in is in measuring all those things that can't be measured in money. And we now have all the science of well-being to tell us how different government policies impact on all those other aspects of human experience that contribute to our well-being. So we've got some policies impacting mainly in money, but nearly all of them having some other impact as well, and other policies impacting mainly on well-being, but maybe some in money. Then we have to combine the two. We know how to do that because we know what the impact of money is on well-being, and that enables us to have a coefficient to add the two together. So this is something that government analysts should want to do. They must be aware. One reason why their measures of cost-benefit often don't get used very much by policymakers is that they leave out so much. And so this is a movement to satisfy a sensible policymaker who's always said, I don't want to use your cost-benefit analysis, it leaves out too much. Okay, we're going to put it in. and then you can expect the policy maker to use it. So one way of looking at the benefit-cost ratio is to measure the benefits in these wellbeing units. But policymakers are much more used to looking at benefits used in money, so we can turn the wellbeing units back into money. And that is what we are doing in Britain. That's how the Treasury Green Book is written. And I gave you, just to make it concrete, the conversion factor for the wellbeing units to be turned into money in order to produce a ratio of benefit to cost for every policy proposal. So it's all very well to say this is what should be done, but it also has to be done, and not many people have done this. So to encourage everybody, our little group at LSE has set to work trying to produce benefit cost ratios right across the board, from roads, law and order, health, education, and so on. And I thought, to make this concrete to you, the best thing I could perhaps do would be actually to show you some of our provisional results. So first I'm going to show you some policies for which the net cost is negative. Obviously, if they have positive benefits and the net cost is negative, they are no-brainers. You go for those first of all. So here are some. We have been developing in Britain a really excellent programme called National Health Service Talking Therapies, evidence-based therapies for anxiety and depression, 50% recovery rates. We're now treating nearly 1 million people a year. That's quite a model. The second one is a parallel policy, which we are hoping governments will follow after our election, to cover people suffering from addiction, personality disorder, severe mental illness. That also turns out, though with less of a margin, to have no net positive cost. Some others, employment support. We've got huge numbers of people living on sickness benefit due to mental illness. They need help back into work. And then I just mentioned our housing problem. Our housing problem in Britain is a problem to do with the regulations covering the use of land. That's also no net cost to the government, and gets lots and lots of houses built. Then I'll come on to some policies which have positive cost, but also benefits which are very high relative to the positive cost. And some of these surprised me. The ones that didn't surprise me were ones I've always favoured, like structured wellbeing lessons in schools, guaranteed access to apprenticeship for people who don't go to university. But I have, obviously, if you're advocating things, you're also looking for other things where you think you might be able to save money. I thought we might be able to save money on the police and on research and development. Not at all. They turn out also to be very, very cost-effective ways of using public money. So just get a look at those sort of numbers. You were talking about 10 or more there. There are then an extraordinary number of policies that take up a lot of money with completely different benefit-cost ratios. The heading is wrong. Benefit-cost ratio is low. Look at these tiny benefit-cost ratios. Transport building of roads, much, much lower than these services to people directly targeted at their well-being, or also lower than, as I said, research and development credits. We have a handout called Winter Fuel Allowance. It goes from everybody who has taxpayers have average incomes to other people who have average incomes. Better ways we could use that money, as you saw, high benefit cost ratios. And then, obviously, the whole age of the issue of the age of retirement. With ageing societies, the burden on the budget of pensions becomes almost impossible. As the dependency ratio rises, we've got to raise the retirement age and save some money that way, and we did find that the hardship imposed by that will in fact be quite small. Many foolish proposals which have no evidence base, like marginal reductions of class sizes in schools. These are just examples. This is all we've got to so far. We're doing a whole lot more, hopefully in time for the new government. But this is what I think our movement needs to be delivering at the level of budgeting. A single outcome. Let's get away from these multi-dimensions where you can't choose between two policies if one is higher on one dimension and one on another. Get to a single outcome and incorporate it into traditional economic analysis. The shocking thing about economics, as you know, is that most economists don't realize what it's meant to be about. Economics was designed to be about the science of what is producing well-being for the people. And the measure of willingness to pay in cost-benefit analysis was meant to be an attempt to get at the impact on well-being. It wasn't. It's got to be expanded. We can expand it, and that's the way to push the whole thing forward and get towards a much better set of policies and a much better outcome. If you want to read any more about this, I talked about misery yesterday, and I think I shouldn't take more time. That's very important, of course. I'm stopping. If you want to read any more about this, there's a place. And it's free on open access at Cambridge. This is one of the good results of COVID. It gives you time to write textbooks. So thank you for listening. I do think that if we were to go down this route, it's a very practical route. It shouldn't upset anybody. It's been done by medics. Let's do it in finance ministries, and let's thereby have better policies and happier societies. Thank you.